Yeah, that can be thrown away.
All right, we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. As you know, this is a place where we question everything, we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain that which is most factual and logically consistent. And we are back here again with our regulars. We have Stanley with us, and we have Steve with us, and myself, who is your host. And we're going to be having a wonderful conversation today. So, this conversation is going to center around three things, three topics majorly. So we're going to be talking about the controversy surrounding Eliza Blue's comment on the community and how community can give consent to adult child sex. So we're also going to be talking about the alleged Chinese spy balloon that's transversing the US. And finally, Ron DeSantis and the banning of AP African American Studies course from high schools in Florida. So those are the topics that we're going to be covering in today's stream, and maybe some other things that may come up during the stream. You know, we like to hopscotch, as Steve would say, hopscotch from topic to topic, but we'll try as much as possible to focus on these topics. So the first one, Eliza Blue,
Notice how
and
Charles put the racial issue very, very last.
What?
so,
Oh, I
so
didn't
why do
know.
you think that?
Because we know what we do when we get into those conversations, and they will take up the entire 2 hour
Yep,
block.
yep. So let's
And
get the other things out of the way first, then we'll have enough time to deal with the rest stuff.
Right. Yeah,
And
let's
well,
get the easy stuff out of the way.
we're all blue today. Eliza Blue.
So I actually wrote an article which would be published on Wrong Speak before it goes up on my Substack, on how race
Nice.
obscures the problem with policing. So maybe in a couple of days it will be out, and then I can also post on my Substack. So first topic. So I sent both of you the video of Eliza. I think Steve, I sent you a very short clip the first time. Then I had to send you a much larger clip for better context, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was a good thing that we did that, because we could have gone off on that very little clip and just missed the whole thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she was getting a lot of backlash from Twitter, but I thought that there was more to what she was saying. So, but as a background, Eliza Blue is an anti-sex trafficking advocate who claims to have been trafficked herself. So she had this conversation about a year ago on a podcast where they talked about whether children can consent to sex. So, but there was a moment in the podcast where she described a hypothetical utopia in which children desiring to have sex with adults would be evaluated by the community the child lives in. And then they would assess whether the child is mature enough, whether the child wants the sexual encounter, and whether the adult has leverage or is forcing the child. So our argument is that in that supposed utopia, if the community assesses that the adult is not being predatory and the child is mature enough and desires it, then the child should be allowed to have that sexual relationship with the adult. But that conversation itself was a carryover from a conversation that arose in Twitter as a result of a Twitter thread by one of the guys in that stream himself, Thaddeus. His name was Thaddeus. So he was talking about, age of consent laws and all that. Maybe I can just no, I think that should be enough for us to get this conversation going. Maybe I'll find the tweet later and we can look at it. So what do you guys think? What do you think about the position that Eliza was taking? Or maybe we should start with age of consent laws in the first place.
Hmm.
Yep. So Steve, maybe you can start.
Well, wow. Yeah. So there's a lot there. I think there's an important distinction between predatory pedophilia and the difference between a year and a day. And what I mean by that is, like, there's like they explained in the video, there's people that, there's, like, he makes the example, there was a 19-year-old woman who had sex with a 17-year-old boy, and she's still on the sex offender registry. Like, obviously that's a place that we need to have more of a conversation of, because I don't think that's right. And there's also a lot of sexual double standards in this too. Like, if a older man sleeps with a younger girl, he's a pedophile. But if an older woman sleeps with a younger man, it's not. You know what I mean? And this has been a cultural stigma for a long time. I'm okay with having a conversation about the borders of these kind of conversations. What I'm not comfortable with is trying to choose or trying to debate an age of consent. And I know that sounds kind of contradictory, but what I'm trying to say by that is that I have no place being a 45-year-old male trying to bang a 17-year-old girl. Like, I just don't. It's not a conversation I'm going to entertain. So, but if we're talking about people younger than me, let's say 25, let's say maybe even 30, I guess 30 is pushing it for me, but let's say 25, because 25 is going to probably be the most common, age group area that is going to be even considered for this, because most older men go for women their own age or slightly close to. To put into context, if we were having this conversation, I would have been 27 years old when my wife was 17. I'm not okay with that. But being 45 and her 35, that's a lot different, isn't it? Like, we understand that there's a distinction between those two things. So, not to mention, there was, I think, one aspect of this conversation that I will happily get on board with is the conversation around people being put on sex offender registries for just pissing in public, because that almost happened to me. People having sex in cars. Yeah, I went around the corner of a building, took a piss in an alleyway.
Everybody in Nigeria on the
right
sex offenders list.
So what happened was, we were at a parade, a 4th of July parade, and there was this coffee shop that had a little alleyway that I was familiar with, and so I went down this alleyway, took a piss, and then came back out. There were 2 cops running in my direction by the time I got done, and they were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Nothing."
Dude.
They said, "Well, if you were pissing, we're going to arrest you right now for I can't remember what it was that they were going to charge me with. It was basically flashing the public or some shit like that." So I narrowly escaped being on the sex offender registry because the city didn't offer enough utilities for me to be able to take a piss, and I wasn't even in public view. And that's the crazy thing about it. And so there's people on the sex offender registry for doing just that. There's people that are on the sex offender registry for going to a website that had an image that they weren't even looking for. Like, the amount of people that are on the sex offender registry that don't deserve to be there, I think, is definitely a valuable conversation that we should have. Absolutely, 100%. But when it comes to the age of consent, you also have this weird thing where it's like, okay, well, what is the difference between 17 years and 363 days and 18 years and 1 day? Like there's not a real big difference there aside from 3 days. So, but we don't treat those things differently.
Wow. So
legally, we don't treat them differently, and societally, we don't treat them differently in many ways.
So before Stanley takes his position, I just wanted to comment on what you just said about, taking a piss in public and how that can land you in a sex offenders list. I mean, that's wild. That's crazy. Because if you look at videos, literally, you would see nudity. You would see in movies, you would see nudity. You see a lot of these things, right? So how can it just seems so contradictory that a society that everything is that liberal, nudity is that liberal, right? For someone to be put on a sex offenders list from just taking a piss in public. I mean, it's not decent, but it's not as if you were exposing yourself to, like, you just whipped it out in the front of a group of people and like, hey.
Yeah, here it's called public exposure.
Well,
it's crazy.
So here's the weird juxtaposition. We're not okay with that, but we're okay with shared locker rooms at public swimming pools where older men are getting naked and showering alongside younger men and sometimes boys and children. Like this idea that human bodies are this bad, horrible thing is ridiculous. Like, a penis is a penis, right? There's a difference between bodily anatomy and sexual acts that our society is not making the distinction between. It used to be, when I remember the very first time I went to a public swimming pool, my father said, "You're going to see a lot of ugly stuff in here today." It's like, you're going to see some dick swinging. That's what it looks like to be a man. It's not something to be embarrassed about. That's what it looks like to be a man. You're going to see your dad's junk today. That's what it looks like to be a man. There's nothing sexual about it, right? And so I went to my first swimming pool and I was like, damn, those things are ugly. But I understood that was going to eventually happen to me. Like, I'm going to be a man. That's going to happen to me one day. And it's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with the human body. There's nothing wrong with the human anatomy. There's nothing evil or gross about the human body. It just is the way life is. But where we're going today is we're so hyper focused on sexuality that we think anything to do with human anatomy is innately sexual. And that is a flaw that we are definitely falling victim to today. We're falling prey to that. I don't like it.
All right. So Stanley, let's hear your thoughts on this.
I had some questions, but I've changed them. My question is, who makes decency laws? Is it federal or is it state and local?
State, local, and federal.
It's mostly local.
Mostly local.
Mostly state. So I don't see the libertarian point of view. And the reason I bring this up is round about the hour, the 60-minute mark, roughly to the hour and 19-minute mark, I kept hearing the state. The state doesn't really deal with public decency. It's actually extremely local. So I don't see the libertarian argument.
Probably what they mean by the state is the government.
Well, no, they mean the country. I understand what the state is. I'm saying the state doesn't have a large part in local decency laws.
But the local government
the libertarian argument is moot.
The local government is part of the state itself. The state government is part of the state itself.
You're thinking of a different system.
Yeah, ours is designed to be bottom up, not top down.
Basically federal. The states have huge authority in certain domains, and things like schools and decency, it's extremely local, like city and county.
Well, that is the libertarian argument, is that's how it's supposed to be.
Well, then they have no argument in this particular video.
Yeah.
It's already local.
Yeah.
So, but what do you think about her comments on if there was a certain utopia where if kids want to have sex with adults, that the community could assess the risks involved and decide for the child if it's okay for the child to have sex with an adult. So if the adult is not non-predatory, if the child desires it, and if they're developmentally and mentally mature to an extent to have sex with the adults, then they should be allowed to have it. That was basically her comment. That it's not as if that was what she was proposing. She's saying in a certain utopia, in a certain libertarian utopia, maybe we could have something like that. What do you think about that comment?
I'm completely against that idea, and for a couple of reasons. One is I'm a firm believer that children cannot consent. Period. Fucking bar none. And to give adults that right, and to take that right of the child to consent away under the premise that, oh, we know what's best for you, is bullshit. It's bullshit.
Well, which adults?
That's the thing. Like, which adults are we talking about here? But even at the base minimum, it's like I am the steward of my child's safety. That doesn't mean I have control over their bodies. There's a difference between stewardship and protection, right? I'm supposed to protect my family. I'm the steward of my children's futures, of their safety. But there's still a tinge of that belief that children are still individual human beings, and they should have physical autonomy over their choices. And to say that, well, if a child wants to do it, well, if the child wants to do it, shouldn't we immediately question whether this child is capable of consenting or not? That's not a topic that they brought up during the video that I'm aware of. So immediately we're starting from
they actually didn't.
Flawed perspective.
Well,
That's
kind
my
of they
personal
did,
opinion.
but not seriously.
I think that's the hinge pin of the entire conversation, really.
Well, I agree, but I'll come at it from a different angle. Now, this is a very particular, and I'm going to say it's an ADOS point of view, and it's something my parents used to tell me. Um, you can do what you want to do, you just won't do it under this roof. You
Yeah.
can do what
That's
you
not
want to
strictly
do.
ADOS, man. I was told the same
Okay,
thing.
but that is the solution. Kids can have choice. Kids can be adults if they think they're adults. You're just not going to do it here, and I'm not going to pay for it.
And should other people suffer the consequences of your
You
poor
know what?
decisions?
You just won't do it here. Or you can stay here, follow some rules, and when you can afford your own place, how is that
Yeah.
unfair?
Mm. So
Well, that's
to
that's a good point that Stanley's bringing up here. Is let's say that that a child emancipates himself from his
Yeah,
parent,
their
becomes
laws
a
don't
legal
allow it.
adult. By all accounts, they have a job, maybe
Yep.
even a career. They're able to afford. Let's face it, they can't afford a house or an apartment in this economy. But let's just say that they could,
Oh, I can
and they're
imagine
on
some
their own.
circumstances where they
They're
might
they're
be able to
feeding.
afford.
Yeah, they're feeding themselves. They are, by all accounts, from all angles looking at it, they're adults. They've been emancipated. Would it be okay in that circumstance if they were 16? I mean, I'm more liable to have that discussion, but if they're not capable of doing that, I don't see them as adults.
Well, here's the deal, and I agree with everything you said, Steve. And there is law that will allow child emancipation. You know, the
Mhm.
colloquial term is "I divorced my parents." That does happen, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's an extremist thing. Sometimes the child is just willful, and I want to do what I want to do. And
Which is a very childish perspective, I
but
might add.
but we're looking at
but
it from
the thing is I think all I want to say is parenting,
Yeah.
parenting, and I can't say it enough.
Yeah.
If you're a good parent, and no parent is good, quite frankly, but if you make a good faith effort, and there are aberrations, because Charles is chomping at the bit to, I think, on average, an earnest parent who does the best they can will at some point produce a child that is a good citizen.
Hmm.
true. So I
And
want to make
I'm that is one of my things. So
Can you get closer to your mic, Charles?
yeah, I'm pretty close to the mic. Can't you hear me?
or just turn
It's
up the
it,
volume a
it's
bit.
yeah, it's muffled a little bit.
Not for
You may
me.
have you may have to go into your settings and look at
Is
your
it
microphone
better?
settings because it might be auto
Or
adjusting.
maybe
I I can hear you okay here.
you can hear me, right?
I can hear you. You're a little bit low volume, but yeah, I
Yeah,
can.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay, so let me change my mic. You guys
It's
just go
not,
ahead.
to me. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, just double check your mic settings on your StreamYard. You can go to audio in your settings and look at like echo cancellation, automatically adjust microphone volume, and you can actually adjust your microphone volume accordingly, and that automatically adjust mic volume check mark. It'll give you that option.
When Charles comes back, I have a question for you, Steve.
Well, I'm sure he's listening. Go ahead and ask.
Um, I'm looking for the question. Um, oh, um, Eliza Bleu brought up a point about, and it's basically regarding the age of consent. She makes a point that back in the day, life expectancy kind of drove the age of, consent and all this stuff. And I don't have a problem with the argument, but I think it's a legacy argument. I don't
Yeah.
think that's a valid argument in 2023.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean,
we can all
and my
understand that.
question
Yeah.
is, what's more important in 2023, life expectancy or maturity of the child? And I
Right.
think maturity of the child, and that is a judgment a parent has to make. Or for that
Yeah.
matter, whoever the potential sex partner is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's look at this from almost an
Can
evolutionary
you hear me?
standpoint. Yeah, we can hear you.
Is it
There's
better?
no need to marry your children off early anymore. There's just not. Like the science is here. We have great medical care that provides and affords us the opportunity to live longer, live healthier, right? There's no need to push the child out of the home and have kids as soon as possible, especially when they have, the younger you were, the more likely you were to survive the pregnancy. Whereas the older you get, and that's still true today, the older you are when you have that baby, the more likelihood of genetic deformations, Down syndrome,
Or
severe autism, all skyrocket the older you get, especially in women over 30 or 35 it was.
and men for that matter.
Yeah.
Over 40.
Yeah, over 40. So really there's no need to rush children into sexual relationships anymore. There's no need to rush them into
But
marriages
what do you
anymore.
think of our argument? I thought it was a trash argument. And
Yeah, I think it's a trash argument, dude. I got to agree with you. It's a stupid argument because we're not there anymore. Like the thing, here's the thing. The only way that I could have that argument rationally is to say we should actually keep the children at home longer because society is even more complicated. It's even
as
more
long as you
difficult.
can stand them.
As long as you can stand them. There's the level of base minimum education is required to go out into this world and live. I mean, they're starting to teach kids how to code in junior high and high school. They're teaching them statistics in junior high. My son is learning statistics in junior high, right? He's learning how to do all these things that are going to be necessary in tomorrow's world. That is not that far away from tomorrow. You get what I'm saying? So there's actually a better argument to say we should keep them at home longer than there is to keep them shorter. So that would be a different perspective from my angle.
I don't disagree.
Is it better now?
I just think
much better.
Again, it's
okay.
I mean,
so
good parents have good judgment, and no one's perfect. You will make mistakes. That's what parents do. But I won't belabor the point.
Shoot your shot there,
so
Charles.
Let me just interject a bit. So there are two angles to this in terms of this child adult sex relationship consent thing. Sorry, I'm coming. You guys go ahead. I'm coming.
Okay.
Well, the child adult thing, I have a story. I was probably around about 16 or so. And, this is going to be just typical nerd, but I was working at a grocery store, like a 10-minute walk from my house. It was the neighborhood grocery store. I've been working there. And there was an older woman, probably 35 to 40, somewhere in there. And she was, decent looking. And I don't know, and this is my immature 16-year-old mind, but I mean, she went as far as to like, hey, you're driving now. Do you want to come over? And you know what? Now, the upshot is I wish I had.
Too scared, I'm sure.
No, I wasn't scared. The first thing I thought is, you know what? My parents are going to find out because they track where I drive, they will
Yeah.
know, and I can't find like a spare 30 minutes in my day. However, me being the smart ass I am, and I've never seen, I know I hurt her feelings. I'm like, I can't because you remind me of my mother.
Oh God, Stanley.
Yeah, well, the sarcasm comes through. Even at 16. And you know
Yeah.
what? I feel bad like 50, like 40 years later.
Oh
Um,
man.
but it was a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Because I was discombobulated, and my defense mechanism is to make a joke.
Yeah.
So
And see, that's where that sexual double standard comes in. Is if that was a guy doing that to a chick, we'd be out there with pitchforks and
I don't know
torches.
about that. I don't know about that
I'm
in
pretty
Georgia.
confident about that.
Georgia?
There's a definite sexual double standard.
I think maybe de jure, but not de facto.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in my experience, and I don't get out so much anymore, but there are more young girls getting impregnated by older men than vice versa. So, is that your point?
Um.
I mean, I think it is. Older women, except for Mary Jo Letourneau. Um,
Well, here's the problem that I have. Is what happens when an older woman takes advantage of a younger boy, gets pregnant, and then forces that younger boy to pay child support.
yeah, I can see that point.
That's
But
a big fucking issue for me.
I'm gonna guess that she's not gonna have much of an argument.
It's happened. There have been
Really?
women who have done that. Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah. Yeah. I can get you some names later. I can't remember their names.
Yeah,
but
later, because that's like what?
Actually, I might.
I've never heard those stories.
Oh, where did it go? There it is.
If a male is under the age of consent and the woman is like, I mean, we're not talking 17 and 19.
No, we're talking 15.
Well, yeah, but I mean, 19 and 15 is different than like your female teacher got pregnant, like a Mary Jo Letourneau sort of thing.
Similar. Yeah. I mean, the kid was like, the boy was like 14 or 15, and she
And
was
how
in her
old was
like
the woman?
mid to late 20s.
And she got child support?
Yep.
Holy cow. Yeah, I definitely want to read that article.
Give me a minute. I'll keep trying to
Well,
find
no,
it. But
do it offline. You don't have to do it now. I don't doubt you. I'm just amazed. I've never heard that.
well, and people can do a Google search for it too. I mean, it's not difficult to find.
I never thought of the subject.
Yeah. God, there was a couple of cases that Warren Farrell mentions in The Boy Crisis or The Myth of Male Power. I can't remember which one. I think it was The Myth of Male Power. Well, it might have been The Boy Crisis.
The Boy Crisis is recent, right? Or is that?
Yeah, The Boy Crisis is the most recent. The Myth of Male Power came out in like the 80s or something like that. But yeah, there's significant issues there because that's something that men can't do, right?
What,
they can't sue for custody and get child support for a child that they fathered with a girl that was underage. They can try.
The woman, fly. It happens, but the woman has to be like wanton, to use an old-fashioned word.
Well, I mean, keep in mind the conversation is surrounding children here. So that's the thing. Is like kid's not even out of high school, and now he's not even in high school in some cases, and now he's got to pay child support for a child.
Where did she get the money from? I mean, well, I'll read the story.
Yeah. So there's multiple accounts of that. It's not uncommon. It's rare, but it's not uncommon, if that makes sense. But
Right.
and the whole thing too is that the problem that I find with this the whole conversation of legality via uh, uh, um, maturity, that's a tough sell for me, because it almost has nothing to do with maturity and everything to do with a very kind of deontological look at it, which is it's wrong. It's blatantly wrong to try and have sex with someone who's 15 years old if you're in your 20s. Like, it's just blatantly
Well,
wrong.
the problem is it is not federal law. It's not a national, like
Yeah.
a nation state problem. It is somewhat of a state problem, and then it's much more of a local problem.
Yeah. Well, the crappy thing about being so localized like that is it makes sex trafficking difficult to do, in the
Well,
sense of like policing sex trafficking makes it more difficult. So in some senses, a federal guideline would be good, but at the same time, being a libertarian myself,
well,
I'm not
there's
entirely
a
comfortable with
federal
that.
guideline. I mean, transport across state lines, Matt Gates, for instance.
Yeah.
So there's federal law.
Yeah. But I think that's it's far too easy. No matter how mature the person is, they simply do not have the life experiences required to make viable, responsible decisions. They just don't. I know
Well,
women that are in their 20s that still can't make that decision because they don't have the life experiences. And it takes
the
people,
experience, and they also don't have a lot to lose.
right. Well, there's people that are good at reading body language, like myself, who could use certain tactics to train and get one over on someone. And this is an important aspect of why I'm so much against the idea that we should lower the age of consent, is because there's people out there with bad intentions who could
Did you
very
say
easily
lower
manipulate.
the age?
I don't want to lower the age. I want it to stay at 18.
Right.
So the problem is that there are nefarious individuals, men and women, and everywhere in between the gender spectrum, that have no problem using their position and advantage as an adult to try and get one over on a younger individual.
But let me play like a Glenn Lowry-esque devil's advocate. That happens at both ends of the spectrum, young and very old. So nefarious individuals. I mean, there are people that are 30 who wind up in crypto, or buying crypto, and nefariousness is not age dependent.
It's certainly not.
And it's not, I'm kind of.
But experience goes a long way to make it even more potent.
Right. And I'm kind of taking you off topic here, but I mean, nefariousness, it's not limited to, any one type of quote vice.
Yeah. I just want to protect children as long as I can.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
because once that innocence gone, that innocence is gone. That is not something you can earn back ever.
So I think we've talked about a lot about the responsibilities of the child, right? So if the child, like you said, you're not going to do, you can do this, but you're just not going to do it under my roof.
Well, no, it wasn't the responsibility of the child. It's what the child thinks they can do.
Oh, okay.
The
so what the child
the responsibility of a child is always the parents.
So
now,
what the child,
but you still have young children. You wait till they get 16. They're going to be telling you a lot of what they can do and you don't need to do.
If I know Charles, dude, that little daughter of his is going to have him wrapped around her little pinky.
And
I've seen that beautiful princess, and he is so screwed.
And guess who's going to be the first to realize her power?
Yeah, definitely.
The last person to know will be Charles.
Yeah, the first person will be her. Yeah.
Well, so
you can see the smile on his face, and we're right.
Well, no, he thinks it's cute now. wait till she's actually manipulating daddy. He's
I
Right.
still have time.
She's gonna
Yeah.
tell her friends at school, daddy's like this. He's a puppet on strings.
This is where your wife comes into play, dude. This is where your wife comes into play. Don't let she needs to be like, don't you ever manipulate men. That's bad.
I don't
Yeah,
think
that includes your father.
I don't think I would mind her manipulation, even though I would see right through it. But I would.
Yeah.
You think?
We want to see you in about 10 years with the logic explains everything. I want that conversation.
Nope, that's not my position.
I'm just going to go ahead and set that up in the calendar.
Save the date.
So we talked about what the child wants to do, right? But the other side of the conversation is, what about an adult that wants to have sex with a child? That's where the problem really is, right? Because the child can want to do whatever they want to do, but it's the place of the adults to say no, this cannot happen. Now I would give an example, like a personal example. So in 2012, I just finished pharmacy school. On the day I took my last paper, I got to find out that one of my friends' kid sister had a crush on me. So she called me and we talked on the phone. She told me all about that. Now, the only reason that stopped me from proceeding with any sort of relationship with her at that point was she was 17. I was 22. And in my mind, I said she was 17.
Ooh.
She was 17. I was 22. And in my mind, I was like, nope, there's no way this can happen, right? Even though you're just one year away from being 18, this cannot happen. And I did not pursue that relationship at that point. I did try to pursue it later when she had turned 18 and above, right? But by then she was already with someone else and it didn't work out. So
she said you're too old.
It was just a 5-year gap. 22 to 17 wasn't really much. So the point is that at that time I had the consciousness it was a deal breaker for me. Anything less than 18, even though I was still that young, but even if I was 19 and she was 17, it was still going to be a deal breaker, right? So the responsibility really should be on the adults. Why is an adult seeking a sexual relationship with a child? Why?
Let me ask you a question.
Why does it even have to get to the point where the community now has to decide whether or not it's okay, right? So that was
now you're hitting it.
With Eliza.
Was she interesting to talk to? Was she worth the time?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, I wouldn't risk it. I wouldn't risk it.
Charles is coming from the deontological perspective here. It's just wrong.
See, I don't do deontological. If she was interesting, did you talk to her parents?
No.
Is this something that's common in Nigeria, though? Or was this just a personal decision for you?
I think it was more a personal decision for me. Some other dude could have, but it was a personal.
Because there's some cultures that would not have an issue with it, so that's why I'm asking. And I'm not familiar with Nigerian culture.
If you go up north where Islam is predominant, 13, 14, 15,
well, they do.
It's okay. So they get married at that young. But down south, no. Parents will not.
I don't know, Charles. That was a. I admire your discipline, because personally, now I'm looking at this from quite a bit older, but she was interesting and smart and cute. I maybe would have talked to her parents. 17, right on the edge.
Yeah, I waited a year to bring up the conversation again.
Well, she had just turned 17.
So
she just turned 17.
No,
that's what it sounds like.
She was 17 when the whole conversation first came up.
Yeah, but you said you waited a year which denotes that she was close to she was just close to barely turning 17. Yeah, so closer to 16 than 18 is what I'm saying.
Doesn't
when
matter.
I said I waited a year, I was like, okay, when she was 18, right? Just an approximation, right? So it's not like exact. So, but when she was 18, and I felt comfortable again to say, okay, now it's okay for us to go forward with anything. By then, it was already too late because she was someone else then. So, passed up.
I don't know.
My point is that I think the responsibility should be on the adult's part, right? It doesn't matter what the kid wants to do. The adult should be able to make that decision and say, no, this is not going to happen.
Well, so I have to clarify here. Are you saying it's the adult's responsibility to say no, or the adult's responsibility to decide whether or not that child or that youngster?
And by the way, which
okay, so that's the distinction that I was wanting, is because there, like the way that you worded it, there was some vagary in there where the adult could decide yes or no. Where you're coming from is like they don't have a responsibility to say no. That should be the response is no. It's not even a responsibility. It's that should be a no. Is that the position that you're coming from?
So the adult, when I'm saying Stan is asking which adult, the adult in question is the adult.
Well, not the Romeo. I mean, there are other adults in her life.
No, the other adults don't have anything to do with any of this. It's the Romeo who has to say no. Is the Romeo who is incumbent on him to say no. It shouldn't even have to get to the point where other people get involved in the first place. So
I don't think that's a yes, no, 0 or 1 decision for a 17-year-old. Maybe courting is one of these things, 22, 17, let's huddle with the parents and let's maybe, I think in that case, now this is me. I'm a lot more wanton and just crazy than you are. But I don't, if she was actually interesting, I might have said, let's talk to your parents, see what they think. And my parents too, for that matter.
Yeah, different approach, different people.
Yeah, but you know me, I'm.
They used to have chaperones for a reason too, by the way.
Right.
Make sure that nothing happened that shouldn't have happened. Right. You know what I mean? But I think what Charles is speaking to here is that because the adult is the adult, they have more life experience, and they tend to be more responsible.
Have that much more life experience than 17.
Sure, right, but they do have more.
They're both,
and that it is their responsibility to protect the innocence of the younger. Like that's how we expect society to function.
I'll concede, but I don't.
I think for me it was more a very mathematical point. It was math. It wasn't anything. It was okay. This is the cutoff. 18 is the cutoff. Anything below this, no, right?
Right.
So anything above that, then we can have a discussion.
Well, we're also doing.
I wasn't philosophizing. I wasn't just thinking about anything else. I was just looking at that cutoff point.
Well, I
always told myself that.
I understand your point. So I'll concede. You made the decision.
Yep. So maybe we should wrap up Eliza's conversation. So the other thing that got me really, 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 really worried about that conversation was that why was the age of consent, why was it even an issue to begin with, right? Why was it up for debate? Because they said something about, there's some cultures where it's younger, there's some cultures where it's higher and all that. Yeah, there are some cultures where it's younger. And I think that probably in the West, based on the history, based on so many other factors, it has come to stay at 18. So why not respect that?
It's not consistently 18. I mean, there are states, especially in the southern states of the United States,
Mm,
you can get married at 14 or 15 with parental, consent.
mm.
Well, that's kind of the thing, isn't it?
Well, I not for me, but it is possible.
There's some states where it's 16, age of consent is 16, but
16. Yeah.
I think it really does have a
Well,
lot to
I'm
do with the
talking the
culture.
detail.
Yeah, but I do
So
think, if you're looking globally, the concept of maturity really does kind of add in here, because if you're in a culture where there's an immense amount of responsibility put on the shoulders of the child from a very early age, let's
Yeah.
say the Philippines, where they have to begin farming or fishing at a very, very young age, and or even in the U.S. where you have farmers who start their children out on the farm, they're driving $1 million combines at 12, right? They're responsible for hundreds of animals, right? There's just a huge weight of responsibility on them. Then obviously there's going to be a disparity between them and the rich, spoon-fed rich kid who has no responsibilities, right? There's going to be a maturity difference between those two
Uh,
individuals.
okay,
Massive,
so
massive
I, I
responsibility.
I think even Eliza made a point like this, that she grew up in a farm. By the time you're 9, 10, 12, you can do certain things like ride a tractor or something. But she also said that for the fact that a kid can do something doesn't mean they should be allowed to do it, right? For
Right.
the fact that the kid can drive at 12 doesn't mean that state should issue them a driver's license, right? Because
Correct.
there is more
Right.
risk to that, right? So we have to like err in the side of caution. Some kids are very, very mature at 14. Some
Yeah.
kids are mature at 12. But the vast majority of kids are not going to be mature at
Well,
14 and at 12. So if you want to use the exceptions to make a rule, it becomes a problem. So I
yeah.
think, taking the upper limit is a better approach than.
So I'm going to 100% agree with you on this, and this is kind of the point that I was trying to get to, is that despite the amount of responsibility that a child has had and how mature they are, the problem is always going to come back to there's no way that you can understand a choice that you're making and the repercussions along with it if you've never experienced those repercussions. You just don't. You can't. It's impossible to experience something that you've never experienced. And so
okay, but that's
when a
not
child is trying to make a decision on whether to do something or not,
that's
they're not capable of acknowledging all of the seriousness that comes along with having a sexual relationship, the risks that come along with it. Are they able to, if they get pregnant, are they able to raise that child effectively? No, they're not. So
I think there's some holes in that argument. There you can be whatever age and never have experienced, something that's going to be life changing where you have to make a decision.
yeah,
Um,
but an adult
I
has more
think
capability to do
I,
that than
I
a child
think that
does.
well, I think it comes down to training.
Training, resources,
I
capability,
think it
ability.
comes I think it comes down to probability. The probability that an 18-year-old is going to be as experienced as a 22-year-old is no. There's a
That's a
difference
bad
there.
argument
There,
too.
Correct.
there's a probability that the older person would have had more experience. Not always the case, but there's a higher probability that the older person would have more experience than the younger person. So if
But
you
let
want
Right.
to
me ask
spread it
you a
out, take.
question. Since when, like, I understand your point about probabilities, but life can't be lived by probabilities.
But life is lived by probabilities, because
And I
how do
would
we
tend to
how do we come to
disagree.
how
There
do
are
we come
so
to
many
certain cutoffs?
exceptions to your point. There's
Of
so
course,
many
that's
exceptions.
why they are exceptions. They are not the rule. They are
That's
Well,
exceptions
what I
and
was
the
going to
no,
rule.
say.
actually, I would almost say the rule, the probability part is like in the background. How probabilities actually work, like get in a car and drive down a highway. The probability is you won't be killed, but you might be killed. Yet you put on a seatbelt.
Yeah.
I mean,
But if you get killed, there was a 100% chance that you were going to get killed that day.
well, no, well, exactly. But what I'm saying is, if I lived by probabilities, I wouldn't get in the car. I might be killed.
That's
There's a
that's not
probability that I
that's not
will
the
be
point.
killed.
So okay, so the point is, if if the reason why we still get into cars, right, is because there is more probability that we would not be killed than we would be killed. So
What?
if it's a
What
situation where if it's a situation where 80% of the time, if you get into a car, you're more likely to be killed. There's going to be
now?
You're
Let's
not going
way
to
think
drive.
less
about.
people, yeah,
Let's
way
think
less people
about
willing to take that
someone.
risk.
Let's think about someone who looks at the 20% that you will be killed. There are people like that.
Sure.
Of course.
But again, they're the
So,
outliers,
you
though.
know what?
Exactly.
If there's a chance you'll be killed, I think there's a. Do you know who Mary Chapin Carpenter is?
Oh my God. I haven't heard that name forever.
I love that woman and have for years.
Who is that?
There's a song of hers called "I Take My
Oh,
Chances."
that's right. She was a singer-songwriter.
Oh, she's still alive,
Yeah.
but I I am thoroughly against living life by probabilities, at least as a rule to living. Like I will not base my life on it's
I
almost
don't
like a
I don't I don't
spot
think
thing.
I don't think it's like living life by probabilities. I think it's a subconscious thing where we already as a society we've subconsciously weighed it. We've done the calculations that it's not a conscious thing that we do. We just know that this this works. There are risks, but you know the likelihood of the risk are minimal that we can afford to take that risk as a society, right? So that's why I brought
That's
in
something
the
that
issue of
children don't
probability.
understand.
Yep.
Right.
That's my biggest point right there. Is
You know, there's the whole concept of, I'm indestructible. So, Charles, I'm making an esoteric argument. I agree with that, but maybe one of these days we'll talk. It's not for this. I don't, yeah, you think, well, is there a chance that I'll die if I do this? Of course, but that's survival instinct. That's not necessarily a
Yeah.
statistical way of looking at things.
I think it's interesting also that we've been having this conversation from a very phallocentric point of view, where it's the man who's the one making the decision because he's the one older, but we haven't covered older women doing this to younger men.
Huh. Good point.
But for me, I don't think it was a gender thing or a sex thing. I was just looking at it from an age perspective. So whatever
Yeah,
argument applies for the male should apply for the female, in my mind.
absolutely, absolutely. I just find it interesting that when we start talking about these things and we're talking, and I've said this numerous times, when we talk about trans people in bathrooms, we're always referring to trans women in bathrooms, but never trans men in
But
bathrooms.
but but,
But
but
that's
there is a reason
I'm
for that.
saying there's
There is
a
there is
concentration on the
actually
penis being bad,
there's
and
actually a
that's
reason for that. The risks are not the same. It
but
is
Well,
true.
not
The
my
let
risks
point.
are
me let
certainly
me
not the
let
same.
me
Not my point.
actually interject.
Wisdom of
There's
the ages.
hardly any risk either way.
But if there were to be
How
a
many
risk,
trans people
if there were to
are
be a
there in
risk,
the
they
general
are not,
population?
Well,
theoretically speaking, the
It's
risks are not the same.
it is minuscule.
and
Of
hopscotch,
course,
hopscotch,
of course.
hopscotch.
Not nope, not okay. Let me not hopscotch. Let me tell you that it's not a problem. It is a made up. It's a what's the term?
I'm in agreement with you here.
It's a moral panic.
Stanley,
It is a
it
moral
doesn't have
panic.
to. See, I think we should not let it become a problem. Take for
I
example,
don't think it's a problem to worry about.
It's not.
let me land. So now there have been reports about
Let the local
certain
people
rapists, right?
now. You
Certain rapists claiming to be transgender, right?
Charles,
So they can be put in female prisons,
how many
and then
transgender
they have
I think we should.
access.
know?
They
I
have
think we should
access
have that.
to-
I think we should shelf that conversation for another time because
Got
we're
it.
gonna hopscotch.
think
We've
we
got
should-
two other conversations that we still have to have.
So what's with this Chinese alleged spy balloon that's flying all over the US?
I saw
What's
this.
going on?
I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Well,
like over Montana or something right now. I
it's
don't.
been
I don't get it.
shot down off the coast
Yeah,
of North Carolina.
Yeah,
Really?
I saw that.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that just
Wow.
before they decided to stream that it's been shut down.
Have they recovered it and actually like inspected it or what?
Well, I'm sure there's a Navy diver or two or dive ship out of Norfolk or Little Creek that'll recover it.
I think that's interesting.
I would have
that
toyed with them though.
oh yeah,
Thank God
would
I'm not
put
the
signs up.
Second Fleet commander.
you got to do it. You got to do what Maverick did in Top Gun 1. You know, he was communicating with hand signals.
You know what?
You know?
I'd have just let it. I'd have just let it float for a while. It's
Yeah.
all
Like,
Yeah,
what are they
which
going to
one
find out
did.
that they can't find from Google Earth?
They did. They let it float for more than a while. I think one of the
I'd have-
reasons why they
I'd
had to
have-
shut it down.
Well,
was that-
you know what? Steve has an idea. I'd have gotten a helo or something close and just gone like that in the camera.
Yeah. I don't know. It sounds like a ridiculous endeavor for the Chinese to try and pull. Like, it just sounds stupid. I mean, but then again, dumber things have been tried.
Well, I'm just like, what the hell are they thinking? When they discovered it, it was over Canada.
Yeah. Like, is this a weather balloon? Like, what is this? I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, that's what they claim. That's what they
Yeah.
claim.
So, like, if we send a weather balloon up and it goes up over Europe, is Europe freaking out about it? Like, it's a weird double standard, I think.
It
Well,
won't, because you're technically not.
I think we just do it over
you guys are
China
not-
for the fun of it.
What, Charles?
Send one
Europe
with
and
the big
America are
bozo of the
technically
clown
they are
face.
close allies, so the threats the threat level will not be the same, so the response would be different.
Yeah, but I mean, as many wind currents as there are, there's no chance in hell that the Chinese knew that it was going to go over the U.S. Like, we can plot courses, sure, but it's not a guarantee. So they would have risked a lot to get nothing, really. It
Well,
might
they
not have
have-
even gone over the section of the United States that they wanted to look at.
They have satellites.
Yeah, like, what's the point of a weather balloon doing the same thing that they could do with satellites? It just seems weird.
And
Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of a chance that the satellites would gather more information than a balloon would.
Yeah. And they're
So
more
the
stable.
The question is why? What is this? Just a pet project from some university students? You know, or
Right.
is it from the Chinese government? I mean, I don't know.
Well, my
There's a lot that we
question
don't
is,
know,
how
you
did
know.
they know it was Chinese?
Yeah.
But
There you
I
go.
think the Chinese government has made a statement about it, and they've claimed that it's theirs, and that it was just a weather balloon. There was nothing. They weren't fishing for anything.
Boy, they would not be good at spying if they're admitting that it's a, it's a you know, hey, by the way, we're going to send this up.
They ought to know ultimately that now that the US has discovered it, they have to bring it down somehow, and they would be
Yeah.
able to find out that this originated from China. So just get ahead of the mess and own up.
You know,
China,
your egg foo young order is going to be late. Sorry, I had to say it.
All right, so I don't think there's much we can
Ugh.
talk about this. Let's go to
the worst form of Uber Eats ever. Your food's going to be cold.
Run.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of that
the,
story. Yeah.
according to Trump, run the sanctimonious.
Oh man,
oh dear.
this coming from the orange man himself.
The orange man himself, who has a name for everybody.
Well, who made that sanctimonious? Who you? Oh, you're.
Trump called him
Oh,
disanctimonious.
Yeah.
Well, I
Trump
bet
called
he
her
didn't
and-
say it about AP African American history.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start.
We'll start from anywhere. So take the lead on this one.
I was watching something today. Um, Now, I think this is poo. I think nothing should be banned in a high school. Now, there are limits, but knowledge is knowledge. Um, AP courses are not like something a lot of people in a high school would take. I mean, you kind of have to, it's kind of selective to take AP courses. So, these courses are college credit. So we're assuming the kids taking the course are like, you know,
Very
number one,
intelligent.
number one, they're going to try and get college credit. Number two, they're kind of advanced. I understand DeSantis's point from looking at it through his politics. I understand his point, and I understand why he would be kind of up in arms. I don't think he's going to win this though, because you're going to come into First Amendment and 14th Amendment, free speech and equal protection. And the 14th Amendment part, I haven't really studied, but you can't, something that is like book, there are books written about this. How can you tell a high school teacher not to teach a book? It's published.
But
With
the
sorry.
the course is supposed to be about history. It's supposed to be about
No, it's
African
not. It's
American.
African American studies. It's not African American history. It is literally African American studies, and it is interdisciplinary. It is not African American history.
Yeah, there's history in there, but it's not
Right.
just solely
It's
history.
interdisciplinary. And that's why I think the left is making a bad argument.
Yeah. Yep.
DeSantis isn't anti-African American history. He's against the stuff that you use to study the history in the viewpoints and the lenses. CRT, Afro-pessimism. He brought up, queer theory. He's against how we study African Americans in their history.
Pan-Africanism, like a whole slew of things that he's just.
That's what he's. He is against the tone, not the details. He's against the interpretation, not the details.
There were some points that they listed out.
He was wrong on all of them.
For example, intersectionality and activism.
Wrong.
Black queer studies, movements for Black lives, liberal Black feminist literary thoughts, reparations movement, Black study, and the Black struggle in the 21st century. So these were.
Let me ask you a question.
Topics
What's
on the AP
wrong
course
with any of that?
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't gone through. I haven't gone through them. To be able to pick anything to say, okay, something's wrong with it.
Let me see if I can lay something down here. Everybody knows I'm no fan of critical race theory, but I've definitely softened to it a little bit over the course of the last couple of years. And Stanley and I are strangely in agreement here, is that anything after Crenshaw isn't critical race theory as it was intended. If you're looking at critical race theory according to Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality, in my opinion, was an absolutely stroke of genius. I thought it was really, really well thought out. Unfortunately, I think it lacked a little bit of execution. But in the sum of things, how many students at a high school take AP courses too? On top of that, when I was going to school, there was a handful of AP students, like maybe 3 or 4 tops. because you have to be at the top of your class to take AP classes. So this isn't affecting a large majority of students in high schools. It's just not. And not to mention, I don't like what I would call and what the left would call tone policing, which is telling us that you don't like something because the way it sounds. Sorry, not a valid argument. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not a valid argument. You're like, oh, I just don't like how it sounds. Well, that's not education. The whole point of education is giving things to students to think about, to be critical, to promote critical thinking, critical acknowledgement, critical interpretation. And what he's doing is he's taking that out of the high school, which is not part of the high school curriculum. The students have already shown that they're way above average to be taking AP classes in the first place. So this is outside the curriculum of high school. Now, conservatives and far right wingers will say, well, that's how they're going to sneak it in there. Okay, whatever. But the fact is, these students are brilliant students. To think that they're not going to have questions about the validity of some of the arguments within or some of the statements made within the AP curriculum is ridiculous.
But that's
so I think it's a whole bunch of hullabaloo about nothing. It's political posturing, and I don't honor it. I don't respect it. Now, Desantis, he happens to be one of the very few conservatives that I actually mostly like. I much actually prefer my governor from my state of Utah, who has shown incredible compassion towards a lot of different perspectives, because he understands something very particular. We are in a society. Society is made up of different people, different cultures, different beliefs, different ideologies, different positions, and that we all have to learn how to live together in one way or another. And we have to give certain movement and certain room for people to explore those things to make it a society. Otherwise, it's not a society, it's a tyranny. Right. This is something that DeSantis has yet to understand, I think, profoundly, that Governor Cox here in Utah has. I think he understands it.
Interesting. Well, my it's not pushback. I don't think you can call Governor DeSantis a free speech absolutist.
Oh, he's definitely not. He is not a free speech absolutist. No, he is definitely not.
I don't think there are any free speech absolutists. It's
Elon Musk thinks he is.
Oh, Elon Musk.
No, even he's admitted he's not.
Speaking of Elon Musk, the reason why Eliza is actually trending right now is something related to Elon Musk and all that stuff, where someone tweeted something about Eliza, which she didn't like, and she's close to Elon Musk, or they have some sort of relationship, and that person was banned off Twitter, right? So people just started digging into Eliza and bringing out stuff. So that's why she's in hot water right now. So yeah, see, I was never really excited about. I'm a pessimist when it comes to trusting people, especially people who have power. People, oh, he's going to be the free speech messiah, and I'm like, well, I don't trust people to that extent that they're going to be able to do things like that. So I don't want to be disappointed. So I don't even find any of these things strange. I don't find it. I expected it to happen, right? People have biases, and they're going to play out their biases one way or another. So no matter how hard they try to hide it or say you don't have a bias, you saying you don't have a bias, you're clearly lying. You just have to manage your bias. You have a bias, and you're going to act accordingly. So
it's clear that he has a bias, and the thing about free speech absolutism is that while most people will say that they are, most are not, there's certain conversations that they feel so grossed by that they will not even entertain the topic. They won't endeavor to even listen to it, much like the very first conversation that we had in this show. There's people that will refuse to listen to it. That's a form of not being a free speech absolutist.
Well,
but at the same time, I like knowing
to it. You don't have to listen to it. You shouldn't forbid other people listening to it.
Right. Well, that's where I was getting to. That is like, there's a certain degree at which we can have a cavalier attitude towards free speech absolutism, but for me, I want people to be able to say whatever they want. For the most part, I am pretty dang close to an absolutist in the sense is I want the ugliest speech available possible because I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know the nasty stuff that you're saying. I don't want it hidden behind closed doors where it has a chance to fester and grow. Like, I don't want that. I want it to be out there in the open so that we can, as a society, have a conversation about ugly things and say, nope, this is where we all agree. This is the line. We're not going to cross this line X here. Right. But if those things aren't spoken about, we'll never know about them. Or if we do, we'll have a problem where we had an overabundance of acts of racism through the last couple of years through the Trump administration, because some of those people were emboldened by what they saw Trump doing. Even though Trump might not have been doing anything besides just speaking, these people thought of it as a dog whistle, right?
Well, it was a dog whistle.
Now we're seeing a lot more racism. We're seeing a lot more white supremacy boiling to the top. We're seeing a lot more white supremacy marches in some states. There was a documentary just a little while ago.
Let me
and
ask
so
you
I want to know those people because I want to be able to go to that street and I want to be able to write down each one of those people's names and be like, okay. I'm going to stay away from those people. But if I didn't hear them speaking like that, I will never know they even exist. I want to know that they exist, and I want to know where they fucking live.
You know what? It's promoted honesty. My disappointment is there's not more objection to the honesty. And not the honesty, the person saying it. Why is there not more backlash?
To what?
Someone like a Trump saying racist stuff.
There is no backlash.
Not from the right.
No,
not from the right, but there is from the left.
Well, 74 million people, as he loves to brag, agree with him. Now, that's a whole separate kind of political science argument, but DeSantis is actually more scary.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I can see where your argument's going with this, but I don't necessarily agree.
He is a Yale graduate and a Harvard trained lawyer, and he is smart as a whip.
Yeah, so I think if he wants to
he is way more qualified than Trump. He would to be an autocrat, an effective autocrat. And again, that's kind of a separate conversation, but I think a dude just won by a huge majority in Florida.
The largest majority ever. Yeah, largest majority in Florida ever. What were you saying, Charles?
So, yeah, I was sort of agreeing with Stanley that if DeSantis wanted to do real damage, he would be much more effective than Trump. So, but my counter to that would be that I don't see him wanting to do damage. But if he wanted to, he'd be a lot much more damaging than Trump.
I think what Charles is trying to say is that he could do significant damage.
DeSantis wanting to do damage?
I don't think he wants to do damage.
He just pretty much violated First Amendment.
Politics.
Politics can do damage, Charles.
The left would. Democrats,
no, it's not.
They were in that position. They do the same thing.
Argument.
No, but I'm saying it's politics.
Free speech a left argument?
It used to be.
Not now.
But the left censors free speech too. So,
yeah.
Let me ask you a question. There are a bunch of people who kind of tacitly agree. Oddly enough, Marxists and, farther left progressives, they agree with DeSantis, especially over CRT.
Yeah.
Marxists do not like CRT.
Why?
Because they think class is everything. race is a part of class. In black Marxists, the black left would tend to disagree, but there are a lot of like really scholarly people like Adolph Reed who actually agree that we need to get over race. It's more a class argument. So, CRT has left and right critiques that are not particularly impressed with the premise.
I see race and class as synonymous with one another when it comes from the argument that one is distinct from the other. I think they're the same thing. I think one gets mistaken for the
They're
other as
not
well, too.
exactly synonymous.
Well,
But
what I mean by that is that when we like, if you're going based off of that argument, and I see someone who is black, then I should see them as a certain class.
I don't think you should see anything.
That was a question.
Not in 2023.
That's what I'm saying.
But if
Right.
you look at it from a historical perspective,
Yeah.
Race, I mean, you go back to like 1820, race is class. Slaves were a class of people. The argument evolves post 1965 or 64.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that, and that's what I'm saying is I'm firmly in line with Dr. Mason on this. Is that race is mistaken as class sometimes, and class is mistaken as race.
Right, but I won't go there.
Yeah, but
Well,
let me add this too: is that Desantis, I find interesting. I find him an interesting individual because the distinction here that I find interesting the most is that he won by a massive margin. The only demographic that he didn't get was the racialized black demographic.
Really?
The Cuban demographic, the Hispanic demographic, the white demographic, every single demographic except for racialized black people. He killed it. He killed it on all of them. They all voted for him in remarkable numbers.
And your point and your analysis. I'm anxious to hear this.
I'm not sure there's necessarily an analysis here, except for the admission that obviously there is something that he is missing within the black demographic, the racialized black demographic, that he is not listening to. Why are you not listening to a significant portion of your constituency, dude? Like, why are you not talking to them? Why are you not listening to them?
He doesn't think he has to.
Exactly, and that's the problem that I have with DeSantis.
So what specifically?
He's not going to be a consensus builder.
How did DeSantis appeal to white people? How did he appeal to Hispanics? How did he appeal to other groups? I really want to know what he did differently that he didn't do for black people, because it's okay. It's easy for us to say, well, he wasn't appealing to black people, but I want to know how he appealed.
To do anything for black people.
How did he try to do anything for any other group that got them to vote him in that numbers?
Sometimes rhetoric is doing something. He Disney and what was it? Disney kind of came out, for LGBTQ.
Disney and black.
Disney.
How is Disney a particularly
You're
black
not
issue?
letting me finish my point.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
He is willing to stand up for his principles, anti-black, anti-LGBTQ, anti-CRT, Stop Woke Act. Trump lives in Florida, and it's not just because he doesn't have to pay state taxes. DeSantis is willing to stand up for his principles. I will give him that. And the Hispanic community in Florida isn't Texas. A lot of them are Cubans, Venezuelans, etc. They're not Mexicans. So, most of the Cubans that came over historically tended to be richer and more conservative.
I still don't understand how this means that DeSantis was able to appeal to Cubans. He was able to appeal to
they are conservative.
to white.
Cuba has its own racial
so
history.
The point is not him even trying to appeal. The point is black people are not conservatives. Black people are liberal,
No,
so they're not
that's
going to
not
vote
it
for a
at
conservative.
all.
But that's what you're saying. You said the Cubans, the reason they voted for DeSantis is that they are conservative.
Cubans are a large part of the Hispanic community in Florida.
Mhm.
The Cuban background are richer people who fled
Fidel Castro.
Castro, etc. Venezuelans who fled, the leftist, communist, basically part of Venezuela. I think Florida is not as democratic as people think it is. They're a bunch of good old boys, and I don't want to get into stereotypes. I think Ron DeSantis stands up for what he believes in. I find that admirable. It's just not what black people believe in.
Yeah, my argument along with Stanley's would be if the majority of the state is conservative, which is arguable, it probably is more conservative, and he's a conservative governor, then he's doing his job representing his constituency. What he's not doing as a governor is trying to pull a Floridian society together where they can agree and where they can have conversations. That's what he's not doing. And even then, he still got, I think it was like 30% of the black vote in Florida. But you also have a lot of other things, like you've had a crackdown on crime. Florida, Miami-Dade has had the lowest murder rate that they have ever seen, ever. They're in double digits. They're not in triple digit murder numbers right this year. This is the first time in their history that they haven't had triple digit murder numbers. He's hard on crime.
He did well with COVID.
Yeah, he did really well with COVID. He's been anti-woke, which there's, Cubans are heavily against wokeness. A large majority of Hispanics are against wokeness because a large majority of Hispanics are conservatives. Orthodox Catholics. Yeah, in Florida. So you've got a massive constituency of
Catholic, etc.
Right. Yeah, I mean, anti-contraceptive, So you have a very large group in Florida that he is representing well. If you want to take it from that perspective, he's representing his constituency exceptionally well, and he's killing it.
He's an effective politician.
Right. It wasn't until we get down to this idea that, he's saying, well, we don't want Black history taught this way. We want Black history taught this way. That's the part that I had a problem with. The biggest problem that I had was, now you get to tell racialized Black folk how their history should be taught. And I have a serious issue with that. More so than I have a problem with CRT. I have an issue with what DeSantis is doing.
However, it's what his constituents, his voters want to hear.
But here's the thing.
No one is for CRT.
Here's my argument against that, Stanley. We are a constitutional republic, which means we are responsible for protecting the rights of the few, not valuing the majority. You know what I mean? That's why we're a different democracies, because we're a constitutional democracy. We're a constitutional republic, which protects the rights of the few over the tyranny of the majority. And DeSantis is not doing that. DeSantis is flat out, he's not doing that.
I would tend to disagree. He is majority. I don't agree that the Constitution is anti-majority. It protects minorities. And
right. It's responsible for protecting the rights of minorities.
I honestly think, as much as I don't like his agenda, he's probably the best governor in the country. He knows his audience. He knows his state. And I think Kemp is actually Georgia Governor Kemp. I actually like him better. I think he would actually be a better president than say, but I'm in Georgia,
Yeah.
so
Governor Cox of Utah is a little bit soft. He's not as hardline as
you know what?
DeSantis.
Wouldn't have a problem. I
So,
think that DeSantis is a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And I also think now the question is going to be how DeSantis, if he decides to run, is taken nationally. But people, I think DeSantis is going to be the next president.
Well, as a lefty, I would much
Amen.
rather have DeSantis running than Trump.
You know what?
Amen.
As a lefty,
Don't tell me you want
one
Trump
is just
now.
smarter
Don't tell
than the
me.
other. one of the twins had the more nutrients in the umbilical cord than the other twin did.
Oh my. So you guys brought up a point that I'm not going to let go.
Oh,
I am
Sweet.
go
Sweet.
till I get an answer. Right. So you
That's
said
why we're here, right?
DeSantis was doing something specifically for other groups, but wasn't listening to the black group. Then you also claim that Florida is a predominantly conservative, Republican, or whatever you state, right?
what
But it
conservative?
just so happens that every group in Florida is conservative, but one group.
No,
And the one group that is not conservative is the one that did not vote
you're
him in
you're
the same
confusing
extent.
how they vote to their point of view.
No, because one of the big points for Ron DeSantis is that he's a conservative and he was, standing up for conservative principles. That's why people voted for him. So for the fact that black people are not voting for him simply means that he's not representing their principles. It means their principles are
No,
not conservative.
nope,
That's the
it's
way I
not
see it.
principles. It's tolerance of racism.
Give an example
Remember,
of
we
how
talked
he's
about
tolerated
dog
racism.
whistles?
How has
Black
it
people
tolerated
will
racism?
not vote for a racist, even if they agree with specific points.
Give examples of Ron DeSantis's racism.
Well, I don't have to. Let's look to history.
No, we're not looking to history. We're looking to Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is
He's a
history.
racist.
Look, give an example
I
of
wouldn't go that far, but
racism.
Well, I would easily.
Give an example of his racism. Give examples of his racism.
He does not want critical race theory taught in his schools because it basically says that America is foundationally racist.
That's a
well, that
weak.
doesn't mean
That
he's
is
racist.
that
that's
is
a weak.
contrary
That's a weak.
to what
weak
most
argument.
dude, go back to a Pew poll where even black people, ADOS, black people in general, would even Republican leaning black voters think America is a racist country.
I-
That's why
that's
DeSantis
beside the point.
didn't get the black vote. You know what? If he was like, I don't know, George Bush, they like George Bush Jr. better than they would a DeSantis.
But
Jeb
did
Bush
they
was
vote for
from
him?
Florida,
Did
wasn't
they-
he?
Did they vote for
No,
Bush?
Jeb was.
Did
Yeah.
African
Bush
Americans?
Jr., the president,
Did
was
did
governor
Bush-
of Texas.
Did Bush get a majority of African American votes when he ran
No.
for president? So
And it's never gonna happen.
It's very
Wanna know
exactly, it's never
why?
going to happen. It's because
Okay,
blacks are always
you
going
are
to vote
not seeing my
Democrat.
point. The Republicans tolerate racism. They tolerate dog whistles. They will, even if they're not personally racist, here's where systemic racism comes in. They will dog whistle. They will Willie Horton. They will do a lot of things they will just say, "Hey, I hear you." They're not saying I agree with you, but I hear you. And
And
that's
the
what
racism
white
happens to,
voters vote for.
and the racism happens to only affect black people, right? How
Racism
come?
affects everyone.
So how come it's only the black people who are taking it serious?
Which part of black people have a very low tolerance for dog whistles? We are trained to even detect subtle racism. You don't have to say the N word, you can apply it. I've got videos to send you. Let's go back to Nixon describing African leaders. I'm sorry, it was Reagan talking
Reagan.
to Nixon describing presidents of African countries. He used the M word, he called them monkeys. Let's go to Reagan, who was on the conversation. His first campaign speech, kicking off his first presidential campaign, was in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the three, I can't remember their names, the three civil rights workers were murdered. Let's go to Desantis. We're not going to do, and I skipped ahead actually. Let
No, let's focus on
Black
DeSantis.
people don't have a problem with Republicans or conservatives. We have a problem with the racism and the tolerance of it. Republican voters, and this is kind of a generalization, if you, it, in my opinion, Republican voters don't care about the character of the candidate, they care about issues. I think in general,
That's every voter.
I don't agree with that. I think black people, because we're kind of sensitive historically, we actually care about character. Abraham Lincoln was not the perfect president. He would have kept slavery if it would have kept the Union together. That's almost a direct quote.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Back then, his character came through, or whatever it was. Black people are very sensitive and maybe oversensitive. I would give you that. Black Americans, maybe we're oversensitive, but we have historical precedent.
You still
And
haven't
I
given
will
a
literally
compelling
say
reason that
Ron
DeSantis.
DeSantis is a racist.
You haven't given a compelling reason to back that assertion.
I don't care if it's compelling. I've made my argument, agree with it or not.
I disagree with it, but
Well, oh well,
caveat.
I'm right.
I think there's evidence to
Tell
support
me
that he's not
You
being very
can't.
that
You're
understanding.
not
tell
Jordan
me if
Peterson. You
you
can't
go
just
back
declare yourself to be right.
to Tommy Tuberville, Phoenix. This, I think it was last August or October, where he gives his campaign speech about reparations and crime. He never says black people, but he mentions reparation and high crime rates. That was a dog whistle. He never said black people, but who the heck was he talking about? Reparations and high crime rates. He might have mentioned cities. Black people listen to this sort of stuff. He wasn't talking about Cubans. He wasn't talking about white people.
So what was
Black
his
So he's
comment
people
about
listen.
reparations and crime rates? What was his comment?
I'll send you the video. It was blatantly racist. And it was barely a dog whistle. And I think I put it up on your Discord. The Tommy Tuberville.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah,
I must have seen
he
it
was.
before. Yep.
It was pretty. My point is that Republicans tolerate this sort of stuff because they care more about the issues. Are my taxes going to be, dude? I don't care if he's racist. He's cutting my taxes.
I think if I was to weigh in on this, I think, Republicans are definitely insensitive to racial issues. I think that's
Don't think race exists.
Almost abundantly clear. But I think equally Democrats turn a blind eye to a lot of racism, or even actually produce it unintentionally. So whether it's intentional or unintentional, it still functions much the same way.
Here's my point.
The difference that I'm trying to make here, though, Stanley, is that I don't think DeSantis himself is racist, but he may be endorsing racist ideas that he's unaware have racial repercussions.
Well, let me stop you right there. He's unaware.
Correct.
Did he grow up in America?
Well, so you said that he's a trained attorney, right?
He went to Harvard and Yale.
Right.
They're black kids. They go to Harvard and Yale.
Right. So let me make my point. I'll make my point.
Apparently, DeSantis's black friends didn't tell him he's a racist.
Apparently. But here's the thing. So he's an attorney, right?
He was a cool guy.
Yeah. So he's a lawyer, right? He's a trained lawyer, right?
Yeah.
So he couldn't miss, if he tried to, he couldn't miss the overall presumption that critical race theory is trying to make. It'd be foolish to think that he's ignorant.
He skipped. He did not take that critical race course at Harvard Law.
But he could easily read it and understand it.
Why would he?
Right. So there's two parts of this argument. Either he knows it and disagrees with it on face, or he doesn't know it and is misrepresenting it, which I think is probably more accurate.
Okay, well, that is a great point. Great point.
I was going to say, and third, he reads it and just purely is using it as a political instrument.
Now, which is worse of the three?
That's a tough one to decide.
Well, it's all are equally bad. It's not really a lesser evil here.
Well, no, that's not the type of argument I'm making.
Yeah.
They're all equally bad and they are all equally racist.
I would have much rather.
Well, no, you know the argument. If you know, but you do it anyway, etc.
Yeah, it's the same thing as doing it willfully.
How can a Harvard-trained lawyer who graduated from Yale be ignorant and just he doesn't know? Really?
I don't know, dude. I know some pretty smart dumb people.
You know what? I don't think you're going to be able to defend him.
Yeah. Well, I'm not trying to defend.
He didn't go to Liberty University.
I hesitate to call someone racist, just because I don't agree with them.
I'm gonna put down my black card. I will call you a racist liberally if I think you are.
Okay, so Stanley,
that's my black card.
Let me get this in, right? You believe America is a racist country?
Yes.
So whether they're Democrats, whether they're Republicans,
yes,
America is a racist country.
Yes.
Now,
it was founded upon racism.
Yeah. If everything is racist,
I'm sorry, you're getting a little low.
I said if everything is racist, right?
Nope, that's not my belief. Everything is not racist. We're talking specifically about America and how it was founded.
Is racist.
Let's keep a tight argument.
Yeah, America is racist.
Not everything is racist.
I agree. That was a slip up. America is racist, right? Democrats are Americans.
That's not my argument.
What was your
America was founded as a racist country, especially economically.
Those are two
America
different things.
is
America
still a racist country.
That was what I was saying. America is a racist country.
You said America is racist. There's a difference.
America is a racist country. Is that okay for you?
Yes.
America is a racist country. Is that okay for you?
That's a little dicey, but I'll accept.
Well, you just said that. That was what you just said. I'm just repeating what you said.
I'm just going to throw in the belief in race is racism.
So America
And
is a
who
racist country.
invented that belief in 1776, and why does
So
it still
so
persist, Steve?
Stanley,
Well, they
let me get to
codified it.
my point. My
Yes.
point is, whatever both parties do, racism is going to be constant, right?
Uh, I think both parties
Hmm.
support racism.
Okay, good. So both parties support racism.
I
So
think
racism, it doesn't matter.
Republicans are
It doesn't.
worse, but not by much.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter.
Democrats are just more
Racism
crafty.
is going to be a constant. If racism is going to be a constant, why are we so? Why is that a distinguishing point between Democrats and Republicans? When the Republicans would care about your taxes, when the Republicans would care about some other things that are useful to you as Americans, the other
And
side doesn't really care about that, and the other side, they're not much better in the racism stuff. So why pick the Democrats all the time instead of the Republicans, since racism is a constant?
I have
That's
an
my question.
interesting
I
view on
don't
this,
think
Stanley.
you can do racism as a constant when you
Well, you
look at
just
it
said
from an
that.
ADOS perspective. I don't think you can do that. However, I think the Democrats are maybe less racist or maybe better at hiding it.
I think here's my point, my perspective. I think there's far more Democrats who vote conservative than they're willing to admit, and I think there's less conservatives that vote Democratic. And the reason why I say this is there's an old joke is vote blue, live red, and this is a consistent issue. So there are actual people that are hypocrites in this department where they are card carrying Democrats, but they vote conservatively.
Okay, I'm not going to disagree, but you're kind of feeding into my point.
Well, that I'm making a different
I
version.
did
of the
say
point.
Democrats are more crafty.
Right. They are. You won't hear an argument from me on that one. I think they're they're probably more crafty.
So race is a constant. Racism is a constant. So I'd rather much go with the party which at least has policies that have real world consequences, like lower taxes or what have you. If the other side, if they are crafty about their racism, why should I trust them more? I mean, you yourself, Steve, you said you want free speech. You want to know exactly how people are thinking. The Democrats are being sneaky about their racism. That's enough reason to trust them
Not
less.
sneaky, crafty.
Crafty. Oh, same. Well, okay, they're being crafty. Crafty
There's a
isn't any better than sneaky. So they're being crafty about it. Why should I
Right.
trust them more?
Well, my point is that I would much rather someone be openly racist than secretly racist, and that's what I think
Exactly.
Democrats are. I think Democrats are secretly
Exactly.
racist. Republicans are ignorant, and if not, they're openly racist. I would much rather prefer open racism than closeted
Yeah.
racism,
Me
personally.
too.
Now,
know exactly
may
where
I
you stand.
interject?
Yeah,
Hmm.
interject.
Black people would rather neither.
Well, sure.
But they're already
I mean,
making a choice.
This is
They
in a
would rather
utopia, that would
neither,
be
but they're
awesome.
this is the country
Yeah.
we live in.
They
Yeah.
would rather
It's
neither,
a,
but
it's
they
a
are
rock
making a
or a
choice.
hard place.
Did you just turn on your light through your phone, Stanley?
Yeah.
You bougie
Bourgeois.
bourgeoisie, right here.
Hey,
I'm just giving you shit, Stanley. I'm just
I
giving
have
you shit.
Alexa.
Yeah, right.
She's
No,
not
I was-
racist. She's not Democrat or Republican.
I love it. Oh man, yeah. No, I'm just giving you shit. I think it's
Oh, I-
actually pretty cool that you could do that. I don't do that because I don't like Big Brother listening in on everything I tell my house to do. But that's
you know
just me.
what? I'm
overly paranoid.
Stories to Big Brother.
Oh, good Lord.
But
Well-
I think at the bottom of this argument, though, really is DeSantis isn't taking part in a national conversation about race that really
Not
needs to be
yet.
happening.
Not
Not yet. He's not.
But
And
if
I
he
think
runs, he will.
Yeah, he'll have to. And I think he's way behind the curve on that conversation. I would like to see more effort from DeSantis to try and make connections with the Black community. rather than ignore them like he is. He's ignoring them, Stanley. Blatantly he's ignoring his black population.
But
He's not
do you want
ignoring them if he's banning African American studies.
I'd say that's a good
he's-
way of
he's
ignoring
not-
them.
He's
but
that's not
what,
ignoring them.
Stanley, what
That's-
do you want him
Oh,
to do
no,
for
that-
black
No,
people?
if he was
What do you
ignoring
want
them,
him to
they
do?
never would have asked him.
Well, he's shuffling them under the rug. I don't know how better to hide something than than brushing it under the rug.
He did
That's
a
what he's
press
doing.
conference.
Oh, whoop-de-doo.
He was up and in front about what he didn't want taught in the high schools in his state. How much more
So it's okay if he
blatant
tells you
can
that he's brooming it under the rug? That makes a difference?
in front of cameras?
Yeah. Does that make a
Well, you
difference
know
saying
what?
I'm
That-
going to be
that's
racist on
even
camera
better.
versus not?
I'm gonna brush you under the rug on camera.
Right.
I will
Still
be
brushing you
blatant.
under the rug.
I
Well,
don't
that's the whole
agree with
point is
that.
brushing it under the rug is the whole point of that old saying is that you sweep things under the rug to hide them from view. That's what he's doing.
1 minute, guys.
He wasn't hiding them, it was on camera.
No, what I'm saying is he's hiding the issues. He's not hiding his racism. He's hiding the issues.
Well, no, he brought up queer theory or black, the feminism parts. He
Queer
he
theory,
brought
yeah.
up his specific objections.
Yeah.
But my thing, and maybe it's a quibble, but black people they're black queers, they're black,
Absolutely.
everything. We're
Well, and that's the thing that bothers me too is basically he's blatantly telling a certain part of his population that I don't care about you. That's what he's saying.
racism. It's a specific portion.
I'm not saying no. I'm saying I'm going to think about that, and I'm going to keep my heart
Well,
open to that
You brought up
perspective.
the point.
But what I'm saying is that it may have racial repercussions. Sure, absolutely. I'm willing to give you that.
Well, see, that
My
part I
point
will
here-
disagree. It
my-
will not. What he did will not matter. It didn't matter
Right.
in Florida. People before the election, he won. Just short of a landslide. They know Ron DeSantis.
Sure.
Black people
I'm not-
didn't vote. Black people who didn't vote. Most of the other people who did vote, they know their governor.
Sure.
And-
I'm just
and
surprised that you're
quite frankly-
arguing with me about this very small
No,
little
I'm
detail.
kind of arguing with myself, but
Oh.
I think I actually think that once if he decides to run nationally, I don't think it's going to matter to America either.
Well, I think the other problem with that is that I think there's a much larger conservative constituency nationwide in the racialized black community than there is just in Florida.
But they're not going to vote for a racist.
They voted for Trump.
No, they didn't. Not the majority. Nowhere near a majority.
There was a larger majority of
Okay,
racialized black
let
voters that
us-
voted for Trump
let
than any
us
other
be
time in
clear.
history.
Let us be clear. 6%, that's not a lot of black folks.
A lot more than before.
Well,
that number
that
keeps
is
growing.
The most interesting thing about this conservative type argument. It went from 3% to 6%. Are we really going to celebrate that?
I'm not celebrating it. I'm saying it as
Well,
a
no,
fact.
no.
That's a 200%
I didn't mean
growth.
you specifically. I meant
Okay.
like
I was like, I'm not a conservative.
the plural you.
Yeah.
I should
The
have said
royal you.
the plural you.
Yeah.
That means that, and we're only 13% of the population, or 12 probably.
It's actually closer to 14 now.
I disagree with that number, but whatever. You doubled your number. Sounds good rhetorically, but
Mhm.
okay, 3 to 6%.
So my basic point is like there's a movement growing, and I don't know how far
I
it will
don't think
go.
it's-
I don't know how much it's gonna get, power through that, but I do know that it's growing, and it's concerning for me from a couple of different standpoints. Is one, both I want to end racism and I want to increase visibility of LGBTQ issues. And both of those, Ron DeSantis has said, "No, F that. I don't want that. We don't want that here in that state." It's like, whether you want that or not is not your judgment. Your judgment is to govern a state, to protect and defend the rights of those who are minorities.
Yet he won.
Why is that so hard? Yet he won, and so well, I think the national political discourse has kind of taken a veering sideways detour away from what our original intent was, which was to follow the Constitution to the letter of the law.
I would thoroughly and vigorously. We're not even on the same planet with that premise.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying, is we're not on that premise anymore. And that, I think,
my point
it ends up
is,
harming.
when you say we,
society much more.
Do you mean the founders?
No, I mean collectively as a nation.
I don't think we're there. We may
Right.
be
I don't either.
closer in 2023 than we were in 1823.
Sure.
But we're not there. And
It's growth, though.
well, I do understand that I can go to the grocery store and not worry about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mean to deny that. I think America is the best country on earth. We're just not exceptional.
Right.
Not
We had that
there
conversation
yet.
the other day. So
Right.
here's an interesting thing. Have you heard anything from Brett Weinstein and his Project Unity?
You know what? I remember when he came up with it, and I thought it was Looney Tunes.
I thought it was amazing.
I
think whoever loses the presidential candidate, the presidential run, should immediately become vice president.
We did that.
I think having
when did
the
that
two-party
change?
presidency is awesome.
I wouldn't. There's some problems with that. It used to be
Sure.
that way, remember?
Yeah, it's
And it caused
Well-
problems. Aaron Burr, Thomas Jefferson as president. It just never worked out very well. And
Well,
Burr and Jefferson were the same party.
right, but still vastly different ideals in some regards. But the thing is that I don't want to be too cliche here, but we're not in the 1700s. We're in the 2020s. You know what I mean? Like the landscape, the political landscape has changed drastically from the day where we had, the Whigs, the Federalists, the Democrats, all these different, political parties all vying for the head above everybody else. And now we've devolved into a two-party system, which is just manipulative as a one-party
We
system.
devolved into a two-party system almost from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you follow game theory, it's almost the only way that it could possibly happen. The only way to get out of the game theory aspect of this is to have a two-party presidency.
I don't think the Federalists and the Republicans cared about game theory. It wasn't
Right. Well, whether they care about it or not, they're still playing it out.
There are some aspects. I will agree with your base statement that we are better than we have ever been. Every day gets better. That part I can agree with. I do not think, I think we are still a racist country. I think we listen to dog whistles and vote on dog whistles. I think America was founded as a racist country, and that's very easy to prove.
Well, and I agree with you on that perspective.
But I still think that it is better. We are better. We are growing. We're not stagnant.
Absolutely.
So we'll get better.
Yeah. I would like to see a better political discourse regarding race in our country. I think people shy away from that conversation a little bit too much, but At the same time, I'm not confident they would be able to have that informed conversation anyways, because it's, first of all, it's not being taught effectively. I mean, we're in
I
Black
don't
History
think it-
Month,
Well, see,
and we're only teaching a very, very narrow view of Black history, and I think that's criminal.
there is no, you know me, I don't think there is Black history in America. There's American history.
Right, and I'm agreeing with you.
But let
that
me-
needs to be included in the history of America as it's taught in schools, but it's not.
I think it is.
Yeah, we wouldn't need a Black History Month if that was true.
Yeah, but I mean, Black History Month came from Black History Week, and this is something that Carter G. Woodson 20s.
Yeah,
And you know, if you go through the 60s, it became essential. Like, you know, look at us. There was something I was going to say, and I'm getting old and forgot. It'll come back to me, but we're better. I can agree with Black conservatives that this is 2023, not 1963, not 73, not 83, not 93. So
yeah.
There's hope. My fear is that we think we're there.
Mhm.
And I think there's
Yeah.
a certain mental, cultural laziness, thinking that we, you know, to kind of paraphrase Martin Luther King, we have achieved the mountaintop and we are still on the plateau. We're
Sure.
nowhere near.
It
I
will-
fear that I don't think we should teach race. I think we should teach history. Race is a part of history.
yeah,
I don't think race in 2023 determines history, but we, you know, kids should know about it. And I think
Right.
kids, you know, this whole argument about you'll hurt kids' feelings if you tell them what their ancestors did, that's a teaching issue.
right.
You can know facts without blame.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Well, you know, and the fact that I was in my 40s before I learned where race came from and how it was interpreted pre and post 1600s, I think is a clear indication that our education system is deeply flawed in the historical aspect.
I don't know that I agree with that. And I agree mostly, but you know, you only have so many hours. I mean, you don't have to go back to like, you know, the Inquisition, which is pretty much where race became an issue, maybe before that. But
Mhm.
I think you can teach the basics of what happened in the past. I actually think you can do that without hurting feelings or even being political.
Yeah,
Now, that's a tall order because everyone seems to be political these days.
it's
and that-
laissez-faire political capitalism is what it is, dude.
we're not, I think you can teach history neutral. Politics interferes with everything, etc. But
Well, my biggest problem, though, Stanley, is that there's such a huge divide, such a huge chasm between left and right because nobody talks. And once you talk to people, like much like what we do here,
good point.
it's amazing the transformation that can be made when you just simply identify, not even agree, but at least identify a point of contact between beliefs. You know, there's
Let me ask you a
Christian
question.
Democrats and Christian Republicans, and they can come together and they can talk about religion just fine. But the second you start to veer out from there, they start digressing into polarized groups, right? Why not continue the conversation and find out where all of these things can be agreed upon, rather than just making one thing a cornerstone argument where they have to go different directions. That's the part that I don't understand why it's not happening.
Well, let me ask you a question. And this is the point I meant to bring up.
Yeah.
Maybe the point, and you kind of made it, is, you know, if you're a white kid living in Idaho, you're not going to meet a whole lot of black people.
Unless you're me and they moved in right next door.
Right. Well, did you grow up in Idaho?
I did. I grew up in Pocatello, Idaho.
Okay. Well,
and
you're one of the
when I was
lucky ones.
when I was 4 years old, an interracial couple moved in right next door to me.
Yeah, you told me that.
Yeah, Jim and Virginia. Jim was a big dude, like big dude, and Virginia was just this very short, very small, petite white lady. It was really it was hilarious because Jim was probably 6'4", 6'5", and Virginia was like 5 foot. But that's when my very first experience with any kind of racial differences, aside from the Mexican aspect of my family.
Well, how did your parents explain it?
Oh, I think they explained it exceptionally well. My father sat us down and said, "If you ever treat that man like anybody else, I'll whoop your ass."
Well, your father, that seems, that's about the only lesson you need to. Not that I don't know that kids would ever do it, but they will hear their friends, etc. So, but I think you're rather exceptional.
I definitely am the exception to the rule. Like I know that there's tons of people in Idaho, and Idaho being the bastion of white supremacy that it was intended to be is a very odd place to find that kind of an experience.
I don't mean to denigrate Idaho or anywhere. Pocatello, didn't Hemingway? He mentions Pocatello or whatever, but I just, my point is that if you've never met a black person, you're going to hear media or a lot of second or third hand, this is how black people are. You don't know until you join the Navy or, you move to a big city. And, therefore, my point is that teaching race in Idaho is going to be like, I don't see how it could ever be effective. Teach history.
Yeah.
Because
I think the reason why my father had the perspective he did is he was from a railroad family. Now, my grandfather was an incredibly racist man, but once my uncle married my aunt, who is a first generation Mexican American immigrant, he began to soften a little bit. But for the majority of my life, my grandfather was very intensely racist. But because of his job with the Union Pacific Railroad, they travel a lot, and so my father spent a lot of time in Idaho, a lot of time in California. So my father got to, from a young age, meet varying different, racial groups. And so, not to mention, this is the 60s and 70s. He became a hippie. You know what I mean? Both my parents were kind of hippies. And so they interacted with people from different backgrounds who just believed in the hippie movement. And so when time came and they became parents, they kind of hold up as conservatives, because that's what you do when you have kids, you conservative, you become conservative. Conservatory is the word I was looking for, but that's not the right word. But anyways, so they started going to church again, and they started, doing things that, conservative families do, but they still held on to those hippie roots, the hippie music, the hippie roots of, love, not hate. And so I think when the time came and we were in Idaho and that couple moved next door to us, it really gave them an opportunity to instill in their children that world perspective of colorblindness. As it flawed as it was far better than the alternative, which was be a racist. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that's the way that they took their perspective. So I've never racialized anybody in that sense, but I do see how it works. And I think the media was one of the most racist industries in this country, because all you see are when you turn on the news and you see news in California about gang violence, they immediately plaster up black folk, right? So now you're training the populace to just only see, whenever you see a black person, oh, they must be in a gang, they must be criminal, they must be violent.
Interesting thing. You know what? The media being racist, absolutely.
Yeah.
They are, putting people in a box, making a story, et cetera, et cetera. To a certain extent, people like John McWhorter and John McWhorter Jr., Coleman Hughes. Yeah, it's a joke. But, they, first thing about, this, that, or the other, white males get killed at, excuse me, a higher rate and all this stuff. That's not a bad argument. It's not.
I think it's misleading.
The police that are the problem.
Right.
Racism is kind of the substrate. And my point is, to a certain extent, I see the racelessness point, that race shouldn't be first, but I don't see the colorblind point. You can't treat. It's a tough intersection, and this is why, and you brought it up, Kimberly Crenshaw is a genius.
Mm-hmm.
And probably, she saw, some things that Derek Bell never did. I think intersectionality kept on a tight leash is great. I mean, the whole point is no person is one thing. We're not automatons. We're not programmed. There's a whole lot of stimuli and inputs and whatever you want to call them. So, I think Kimberly Crenshaw, and she's still around. She still gives talks. She's a wonderful person. She's a sweetheart.
And she doesn't even like how her intersectionality has been bastardized by the left. She hates it. She hates it.
Yes.
She's even gone on to interviews and been like, "This is not how this is supposed to work. This was a legal theory. It was never supposed to be a social issue."
Amen. But America, we take everything and just take it
we fuck up everything. That's kind of our thing.
Fuck up.
That's our legacy. Well, that's our legacy. Is there oil in that country? Great, let's go fuck it up. But but no, really, for real though. I mean, there's so much to that component of racial discourse, and I agree with you. I think John McWhorter is a little bit soft here, but the overriding point that I would make in this situation would be the best thing to happen with racial discourse has been the advent and invention of social media, and more importantly, YouTube. It has given us more access to experiences of people of different backgrounds, different beliefs, different racial backgrounds, different demographics. So we're able to actually hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what they believe, rather than just trusting the media or trusting personal opinion. Like, it's given us an opportunity. Like, I would not have this opportunity to talk to you 20 years ago.
Right.
So the experiences that we've shared together, both here and on the Discord server and in phone calls, like, these are experiences that have never existed before. And I have a difficult time saying that has not changed the racial discourse in America. It absolutely has to have. And I think it's changing it for the better, because now all of those stereotypes are being pushed away and being like, no, this is what I am, right? Rather than allowing a narrative to be plotted out for me. You know what I mean? Now I can discard bullshit and actually get down to what I want to learn from you, or from Charles, or from Dr. Mason, or all these other people like Brittany King and everybody. I have access to these people, and they're changing my life on a day-to-day basis, because they're giving me knowledge and wisdom that I never would have gotten anywhere else. I would have had to have
actually,
read 300 books to get the perspectives I could have just in one conversation with you.
books are one thing. Um, I would tend to agree with the overall perspective, that or your overall point. Um, my only thing is, we are where we are, which is way better than 250, 400 years ago,
Yeah.
500 years ago. My fear, and it's probably, kind of like, a dumb fear. We must understand that there's still work to do. Um, and I was going to bring up something I saw. There's a Medium article, Medium, it's kind of like a Substack thing. You probably know what it is. Um, um, a white woman married to a black man. And I haven't read the article because to me, kind of the title is off putting. But I just happened to scroll down into the comments, and the first comment was, "You are an in lover."
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's social media.
Yeah.
I
That
didn't,
way is harmful.
well,
I don't
that's,
think people take those kind of people seriously. Do you?
well, no, you should take them seriously.
Well, no, what I mean is like you shouldn't take them seriously in the aspect that they represent a large portion of the community or a large portion of society.
I think it's a silent majority.
I think it's a silent minority personally, but it's a large enough minority that we should be concerned about it. But like that person's perspective is not universal.
I'm I'm an old black man, so my son is younger, my brother's 13 years younger. I'll leave it to the young folks, but I will say that it is at best 50-50. In my experience, is some of the people that you would never guess. Oh my goodness. Offline, one of these days, I'll tell you a story about some guys that I went to high school with. And um, there's a whole story. This is like, when I was in college, it was like before, um, of course, this is like back in like the late 80s. But I think that there are people who would never use the N word that would tolerate someone else saying it and not call them out. Now, it works in the reverse. It's easier to, not call out someone like a guest. This woman was a guest, or girl was a guest. It's easier to be silent than it is to call someone out. So, I'm not going to go, you should have called them out or anything like that. But it goes back to my point that there is quite a number of people that are either comfortable being silent or comfortable with the premise. There's no way to suss it out. 74 million people voted for a racist. And let's put it better, 80 million people voted for a racist. Biden has a pretty checkered history.
Much more checkered than Trump was.
No.
Yeah, this dude actually.
Trump has a lawsuit that he shared with his father for racism back in the 80s or the 70s. So
yeah.
No, it's just Trump.
But here's the thing, though, Stanley. Biden
And then
has
Fred
on numerous
Trump
occasions.
was,
Yeah, but
you
Biden
know,
has said on numerous occasions incredibly racist things, and not to mention he was a proponent of
not
segregation
lately.
as well.
Oh
Well, yeah, not
yeah.
lately.
I
Like,
remember.
it's like, how do you
I
ignore
don't
these
think
things?
that "you ain't black" was racist. I think it was presumptuous. He
I
thought
think
he
it was
was. He thought
incredibly
he was
racist.
down. He thought he was a bruh.
Yeah, and so did Hillary with her hot sauce joke. Um,
Oh well, you know what? That wasn't racist. It was just stupid.
that was placating clearly to a racial constituency.
She was
I'm
trying to
sorry, but that
form a
was racist.
connection.
Stanley,
Hey sis.
always.
Hey sis.
Stanley, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can actually hear you really well.
Yeah, so Stanley is always very light on Democrats. He will make excuses for
He
them.
is. He
Always,
is. He totally is.
always.
Yes.
But he doesn't
Let
give
me tell you.
Republicans
I tend
any
to
room,
lean
any
Democrat.
wiggle room.
I will be lighter on Democrats, but I also see them as a poison that's not going to kill me. It'll make me sick.
I don't know. What were you saying, Charles?
Yeah, that's all I had to say. I was just
And,
noticing
and yes,
him
Charles,
making
I'm partisan.
excuses for Joe Biden, making excuses for Hillary Clinton, but then look for a roundabout way to say DeSantis is racist. It's really,
He's
really,
bull.
really weird.
I think I think they're equally racist. However, we're talking like a 30 or 40-year time span. You know, um, Biden back in like the early 70s, can't remember the year, he came out against busing in Wilmington, Delaware. By then, he was a senator of Delaware or for Delaware. And he basically had a problem with busing white kids to black schools. He had that was when he paired up with Strom Thurmond. Like Strom Thurmond, there's no one who can't say Strom Thurmond wasn't a racist. And
I don't. I can't agree. I can't disagree with you on that. There's like clearly.
But Biden formed. It came up in Biden's presidential campaign. Biden, I don't have. I think Biden at 80 is not Biden at 30 something.
I want to make a worse joke than that.
However,
but
I'm not
going to.
making.
Yeah, but America at 300 is just the same as America at 1 year. Racist.
Let me put it to you this way: Biden has done his damage. He's on a tour to like fix his reputation.
Sorry.
And quite frankly, Biden's just less virulent than Trump. And I don't think Trump, to be honest with you, I don't think Trump is that virulent. The up and coming virulence is going to be DeSantis.
Oh, Stanley, don't do this. Don't do this. Trump was the big bad wolf.
But I must.
Trump was the scary,
I must.
you know. Now Trump is not so bad anymore. It's DeSantis. No. You don't get to play
Trump
that
isn't
game.
bad.
If,
He's worse.
but you just said he's not virulent.
Well, I stand by that. He had black friends.
You're just prepping DeSantis to be the bad guy. That's what you're doing.
Trump had black friends.
Melinda is like, Biden has been a racist for like 70 years.
So is Trump.
She's totally
Well,
accurate
no.
in saying that too.
Trump has been.
Good job, Melinda. Absolutely excellent.
Trump's father was like kind of clannish, and Trump lost a lawsuit for racist rental property. So I think, there are different kinds of racist. They're racist in different ways, but I would agree
Well, you
with
know,
Linda that they're both racists.
do you think they are products of old racism dying?
Yes.
That's what I think.
And that's what worries me about DeSantis.
You think there's a new type of racism brewing, or what?
No, I just think DeSantis may be kind of a legacy, but the one thing that's interesting, he was a Navy lawyer. So, he was in the Navy. He's known black people. I could say that, and I might even take it easy on him. He just believes what he believes. He's an ideological racist versus a gut level racist. Does that make a difference?
Well, let me ask you this question, Stanley. Do you believe that DeSantis is what happens when colorblindness goes too far?
No.
No? To the point of ignoring problems?
Oh, that's a difficult question.
Because that's kind of what I'm thinking is like perhaps he's taken colorblindness too far to the extreme to the point where now where he's ignoring issues with his his racialized black demographic.
I will say yes, you're right. However, if you're saying that race doesn't matter, I think you're right.
I think that's what he's saying. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah. Okay, I see your point. But I think he's wrong. We aren't at, and this is my point, we're not there yet.
Sure. You're not going to find a disagreement from me. Like,
So,
even though that we argue race from a very different perspective, you and I, we still agree on very like cornerstone points.
right.
That's one of them.
And I'm not saying DeSantis is a bad person. I think he's a racist.
Yeah.
But let me put it to you this way. I use the term a lot more loosely. I think if you're not a personal racist, but you use dog whistles to get elected to an office, you're a racist.
Hmm.
So, I'm a lot more, it's like slathering peanut butter on a piece of bread. Not every corner of bread has peanut butter, but it's a peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah. Only monsters don't peanut butter their entire piece of bread. I'm a perfectionist when it comes to my PB&J, and every square centimeter of my toast or my bread is peanut butter. Toasted butter and peanut butter.
I bet you toast it, and I bet it's wheat bread.
Sometimes.
But bottom line is, I don't think DeSantis is a bad person. I think he may even have a goal. But I do not agree with the premise that if you ignore racism, it's gonna go away.
Right.
I do not agree with that. That's why I'm not, a colorlessness or racelessness or colorblind.
Yeah.
I think the opposite. I think you should embrace the difference. Colorblindness is ignoring the difference. Racelessness is just like there is no difference. I think embracing the difference is a third category.
He's got so many racial demographics in that state.
But
every state, every southern state has huge racial demographics.
Right. So that's why I hesitate to call him a racist, though.
Because
I also think that does something to diminish the phrase "he's a racist." I think it actually diminishes it.
I think he's a racist. Maybe inadvertent, because you brought up that point.
Oh, Gavin Newsom is a pile
Well,
of
no,
crap.
no. You brought up the point that maybe he doesn't realize it.
Yeah.
DeSantis, I mean.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I disagree with you on that.
Yeah.
But someone needs to talk to him. And I would think in Florida, there's some black person who's a DeSantis voter that would sit him down and go, hey, Ron.
Right. Did you ever think about this?
And I'm
Yeah.
sure. But see, the thing is I think there has been such a person.
You know, that's something that I do like that Democrats do really well is they really do show a diversity in their staff administration that Republicans just do not. You know, if you look at the background of Obama's administration, very diverse background. And it was wonderful to see that diversity. And then you go to Trump and it's like there's a couple of people of color in their group. And then you get to Biden, who, you know, despite what you think about trans folk, his cabinet is very diverse. And I would like to see that in more conservative administrations.
Why is diversity a goal?
Now,
because we're a diverse country.
Well, this is where you and I will actually disagree in the reverse. I think Democrats are performative.
Oh, no, we're not going to disagree with that.
If you have to think about diversity, then it's not diversity. It's pandering.
I want to agree with you majoritively on that, but I do have an argument. But I'm not going to waste my time.
Well, I want to hear your argument, but Biden I don't think it was the best decision. Now, the end result is excellent, but I will nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court. I wouldn't have done it, and I'm a black man.
I wouldn't have said I was doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Therefore,
yeah.
The performative. I will say
he did not need to announce it. He didn't need
what Charles? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He didn't need to announce it.
Biden did not need to make that announcement. He could have just nominated her, and everyone will see what he's done. Right?
It's performative virtue signaling.
He can claim it after the fact and say, you know what? She's actually, aside this, she's actually the first African American female, whatever, George, whatever. That should be a secondary point.
Female would have worked.
He sort of made it the primary point. So that's why it just seemed somehow.
But you know, I want you to take notice that I realize Democrats are performative. I think Biden
take notice.
Is reforming for the good. I'm not gonna, vote against him. And as it turns out, I don't know, I have a thing about listening to Supreme Court arguments over the past year or two. She's great.
I have not read any of her work yet, but
you can listen to it on a podcast. Like the Supreme Court does their
C-SPAN carries a lot of their arguments.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have listened to some of them, but
but she's also young. She'll probably get tired. However, it's a separate conversation, but conservatives, because I listened to a Hoover Institution podcast, which is conservative, and they are already kind of the Hoover Institution Supreme Court podcast. It's not quite a joke, but they think she talks too much.
Of course they do.
No, they literally, like Ketanji Brown Jackson used, literally they count the words.
Yeah. I like the Brookings Institute a lot better because they're much, much more bipartisan.
Well, they're pretty much center.
They're center. They are pretty much center. They actually go out of their way to try and make center arguments and hire centered people. or
Right.
at least make the overall perspective centered. And I really, really like the Brookings Institute as far as
So
that's
do I.
concerned. But you know, the difficult time that I have with a lot of these conversations is that they're always going to be very complex, and there's never going to be a simple answer for a complex conversation. But I think DeSantis would do well to begin some kind of conversation with his racialized Black constituency, because I think the only thing that could come from that is benefit. I think being able to identify with
Agreed.
the entire demographics of your state, rather than being selectively exclusive, I guess you would say,
Mhm.
is only going to hurt. And
You're right,
if he
Brad.
like he's
I can
touting,
feel
yeah, he's touting, you know, winning by a 19% margin, but what if it could have been 25% margin?
you. Right.
You know, that's the critical aspect that I think he's missing out on, is like, you could have done more, and you could have given an opportunity to hear people speak. But I think he's so caught up on this support from the conservative aspect that he's failing to hear that there's any other perspective. And I wish he would take the time to do that. If he did that, I would be able to support him a lot better. But as it is, I don't want to support him at all. Even though I agree with some of his policies. Like, I agree with his Second Amendment policies. I agree with
Well, see,
immigration policies. I agree with a lot of his policies, but then, you know, much like other people, when they start to get into these fringe conversations, which really should be not on the fringe, they just completely fall on their face. And it's just like, man, you almost had me, and then you lost me.
well, here's the deal. He is governor of Florida.
Yeah.
He knows his audience. He knows the room. He knows the state.
Right. But he doesn't know the country audience. He
Well,
thinks he does.
he's going to have to learn that.
Right.
And
Right. If he's going to run.
That is where we're going to learn who Ron DeSantis is, and
Yep.
is he ready to govern 50 states, not just Florida?
Right.
And I will be honest, I have an open mind. He has room to grow.
I'll keep an open mind until he closes it.
Dude was a Navy lawyer.
Yeah.
Dude is Catholic. I mean, there's some reasons, and you know, I'm not a hippie, but I could find a reason. But he's going to have to ameliorate. He's going to have to grow.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Hey Charles, it's we're going on 2:30 now. Did you want to end, or
He probably fell asleep.
he might have?
No, we can,
It's like, oh,
we can end right now. So
Here's a non. Glenn Lowry is part of the Hoover Institute. Like that really matters.
surprise, surprise.
YouTube really hates our conversations because all our live streams are demonetized. I don't know what I have to do to these guys, but we'll keep having them.
Wait, hold it.
Anyway.
I think it might be the content and the language, because we do occasionally drop F-bombs.
Wait, we demonetized you?
No. I say YouTube hates our conversations. What I'm saying.
Why?
They don't like these kinds of conversations. It's too controversial for them. So
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to find a different platform.
well,
There's
no,
always Rumble.
I think we can always continue here. I want to have the conversations. YouTube has a bigger reach, so.
Well, did they tell you exactly why?
No, they won't tell you. They just it's not the channel that's demonetized. It's the videos. It's themselves. All the videos. Most of the videos are demonetized. So.
Well,
If they don't even like the title of the conversation, they'll
Yeah.
demonetize you. They're little
Yeah.
tyrants over there at YouTube. But
Yeah.
I need to get going. I need to spend some time with my family. So
how about Title One? I love Elon.
just have all of them that way.
All right, guys. Thanks for this. Thanks, Stanley. Thanks.
I
Steve.
enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
catch
as
you guys in
always.
another live stream. Thanks, Melinda, Anan, and there's this other guy that came around today.
Next time,
Antebellum Black
Antebellum
American.
Black American. Thank you for coming. So see you guys in another live stream next week, Saturday. I'm going to be talking to Adam B. Coleman on what happened to the Twitter files. So we're going to have
Excellent.
that conversation. So see you
look
guys
forward
then.
to talking to you, Melinda.
We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.